Anytime there was a difficult situation, it's always people-based. I used to describe myself sometimes to people as who didn't know the space as a translator. I kind of sit between people and make sure that the people in this room know what's happening over here, and those people can clearly communicate, because a lot of times that there was friction, it was just a misunderstanding.
Erin McDermott, formerly Erin Lindquist. You're still on my phone that way. Welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great because I get to talk to you today.
Likewise.
I have such great respect, but more than respect, I have tremendous love for you. You're such a dear friend. You're the kind of person who I can call like out of the blue, like 5 years later, and like, hey, I want to talk, and you're there.
I mean, I want to thank you so much for inviting me to this opportunity to chat with you, which, as you know, I always love so much. I feel really grateful that we worked together in the past and are here today, and doing new things and just like moving through life and staying connected throughout that.
This is the Unboxing Creatives podcast, and it's about taking time to speak to somebody about what their professional and personal journey has been, but more importantly, what their relationship to creativity has been. And honestly, just running down how I know you as a creative, as an illustrator, as a business owner, as a yoga teacher, as a business analyst. I mean, the list. A pottery maker. The list goes on and on. Let's start with someplace else where we have in common. You are also now a parent. Is that right?
Yeah, my daughter Willa is 18 months old. And yeah, I mean, especially when we kind of reconnected, I guess, post Willa and lately. And I heard about this project and how you were doing it for Remy and Milo. Like, they're the special audience. I just resonated so much with that, because I think like having Willa in my orbit and around every day has really just like, the way we started our conversation today was I called you to say my nanny got sick. So I'm like having childcare. So like with everything I do in life now is sort of shaped in a way by how I want to show up for her. And it was something that was kind of unexpected for me in a way. I think pre-kids, I had always had a creative practice and wanted to have that. And I think there's also a lot of rhetoric out there about how having kids, like, just maybe negatively, at least what some of the things I've read about, has been like a challenge to creativity for artists or for people. I think I know like famous women artists have had some reflections in that way. Like I was reading something about Georgia O'Keeffe recently, and but I I really truly feel that Willa has made my creative practice better and stronger, and like I wouldn't change anything in the world for what I'm doing now. Like, just to have her in my space is so incredible.
Give me one or two kind of like turbo buttons that she's given you as a result of her being in your life.
Yeah, I think that the thing that maybe surprised me and was a biggest point of growth was just how much I had to slow down. And that was both frustrating, but I think I was thinking about this morning, like creative people can really thrive in parenthood, because like creativity is just responding to the world around you and thinking through like just a response to it. Like, it's just a matter of saying like, these are the conditions I have to work with right now, and this is where I'm at today. And creatives, as like a whole bucket of everybody, have this like superpower that they have access to, I think.
I want to touch on something that is really fascinating. There's a thread both in terms of what you're talking about as a parent and as a creative, of some things being in your control and some things being out of your control. And the way that I see it is where the two meet is where you get to make a decision on what happens, and that sounds a lot like creativity. I mean, what do you think of that? What are your thoughts and feelings on the whole control versus no control and making decisions?
One of the biggest creative projects I've done recently is design our house that we live in. I went to school for architecture and never went down that path, I think, professionally, but always had this, and still have this passion for architecture and design. And we we broke ground in May, and Willa was born July. So a lot of it is like when you think of a project or you come to the table with a project that you're really excited about, I think I have a whole idea in my head of what it looks like,
Mm,
how it's going to be. I'm going to make all these like beautiful drawings and do all this stuff and like have all these great mood boards and like really be organized about it. At least that's what happens in my head. I'm like, I'm going to approach this from like a really organized, I'm going to have all the details pinned in. And then like even though I know this logically, like life happens and it just doesn't work like that. I wind up being like in this specific case of this project, like I've been on site with the builder, like sketching in a notebook, like this is what we're going to do, and this is like the size we need to have, and this is the thing. And in this world we live in now, where a lot of where you go on Instagram and everything's very polished and everything's very
right.
like tight. I think I still strive for that. Like I always even more I try, I think since Willa and since like, there's just food all over the floor constantly and toys everywhere and like nothing's getting put in order. I have also, I think, personally leaned more into the space of order individually because it's something that I can control, but I'm also loving the lack of control that she brings. So I feel like that kind of has winds up making it a nice balance. But like trying to control the things that you really know you can't, just, I think, doesn't necessarily end in the most creative, most like exciting place, even.
How have you been able to work Willa into any of your creative projects that you're doing now? I mean, not literally having her, you know, help pick colors, or
Yeah.
maybe, but like, being a mom, how have you been able to incorporate her either literally or figuratively into work?
There was a day I really, it's one of those things I wish I had my camera to capture this, but I have such a vivid memory of her in this moment that it's okay. But we set up this little easel for her that was her gift from for for Christmas. And she is, talking. She's fully mobile. She's talking, and she just would like come up to the easel and just have this amazing energy and just whatever. Like I'm singing, I'm making noise, do, like, and I'm just like, I really want that, like to feel that way when I'm doing stuff. And it was a great reminder to me that it's work. I support my family with what I do, but it can be fun, trying to understand how she sees the world or just trying to do my best to be present when she is sharing her world with me. I think it's important not to put pressure on yourself to be like the happy, like free flowing all the time because it's just not realistic. The whole thing about creativity, like, is taking what you have and presenting, doing with it, what feels good, what the best you can, and like what's on your mind, because inevitably it'll connect with somebody.
When you and I worked together, I think this is what, maybe 10 years ago now. We were
Yeah.
together at Razorface. You were in some of the most difficult projects. You and Christina Lagoto were always pulled into the impossible projects. Can you talk to me about being in those impossible roles?
Anytime there was a difficult situation, it's always people based. I used to describe myself sometimes to people as who didn't know the space as a translator. I'm like, I kind of sit between people and make sure that the people in this room know what's happening over here and those people can clearly communicate, because a lot of times that there was friction, it was just a misunderstanding or a misinterpretation. And visuals, and I think, yeah, like visuals and graphics go so far to bridge that gap, but then also it's just having a conversation with people.
There is a book that I have.
Oh
It's
my
called
gosh.
Health and Happiness,
Yeah.
and just the illustrations and the hand uh, lettering. It really is. a certain style that you've honed, and it's really beautiful. How would you describe what you do for a living creatively?
Yeah. So I think there's sort of like the macro and the micro level of it. My projects span a few different buckets of creativity. There's web design, which is sort of the biggest bucket, but for me, it fills me up emotionally. Like, I have fulfillment from it, but there's a lot of other creative outlets I have as well through illustration and just visual making tangible things. Like I spend so much time on the computer and I think balance is so important in life.
Mm,
Um, Overall, just for anything. So to sort of counteract that, I do try to like have my hands do other things. I think it's healthy if you don't necessarily put yourself into some kind of a box or take time to learn. Maybe the better way to frame this is to take time to learn how you work best
mm.
because it's going to be different for everybody. Some people like need a schedule until they have kids. But no, like some people like
Yeah, schedule goes out the window
I
when you
know.
have kids.
It's so true. Some people, having and maybe if it's not a schedule, it's a ritual. I think we talk, so it's not necessarily like there's a time of day you do it, but it's something like something that you do every day, but at some point during the day. So it's some kind of a ritual that you create for yourself.
With what you do for a living, you mentioned web design
Oh, yes.
as a part of it, and you mentioned animation. Oh, no, I'm sorry,
Illustration.
illustration.
Yeah.
And illustration is a huge part of your web designs, right?
Yeah, I think I like incorporating like handmade elements into the work that I do. And one of my favorite things to do before I go to bed at night is to read Calvin and Hobbes.
Love
It's
Calvin and Hobbes.
yeah, it's such a great book. And Bill Watterson is so this book that I had found. It was the 10th anniversary edition, and I wasn't expecting this at all. But in the introduction, he had written up a ton of information about his process. The thing that was interesting is he said there all the days were different. Some days he would wake up and come up with 4 strips at once. He would just feel this energy and this inspiration. And then other days, he's like, I'd be staring at a blank piece of paper and just kind of waiting for something to come to me. And, it might look like I was just goofing off, but I was really trying to let the process unfold. And I think that really stuck with me because I personally, with some of my day to day work, since this is, there's work that I do creatively that I charge money for. There's work that I do creatively that is just personal. And I think it's just navigating in this era of hyper productivity, um, setting boundaries for yourself. I think setting goals is important, but then also just having those boundaries allow you the space to breathe, like not both literally but also creatively, because I think it's really hard also for people who aren't in a creative space or do a different type of work to understand. And so there's this level sometimes of feeling like you need to justify it and you don't. Like I have to almost tell myself that. So I'm like saying it here. You don't need to justify it to anyone but yourself of saying like this is where I want to devote my energy and my time because I think that's really important.
That's so great. I mean, it's funny. That is almost kind of like the big adult person version of standing at the easel and having the freedom.
Yeah.
What misconceptions are there around being a creative professional that you come up against?
I don't know. The misconceptions I think sometimes can fall into creatives is the word or the feeling of like a hobbyist, or it's at least for me because working at an individual level, it doesn't feel always as like important for lack of a better term, but I think for me, this is like speaking to my own personal experience. I have a hard time identifying myself.
Hmm,
Am I an artist? Am I an illustrator? Am I a web designer? And sometimes I change that depending on who's in the room.
sure.
That doesn't always feel good. Sometimes I say to myself, like, I should really make this decision for myself. So we were talking a lot about the like free spirit. And I think that's where it has to start. Like, you need to have that feeling
Right.
before you can move into anything else. And then I think the second part of my practice that has become really important to me is craftsmanship. Creative work, there's nothing more important than it right now, in my opinion. Like, a lot of the, you know, project management stuff, like, technology is taking a lot of that over, and what's left but folks who are kind of thinking outside the box and connecting synapses in their brain that, like, have never been connected before, and being curious enough about it to go out and explore what that might mean.
If you could take like your 8-year-old version of yourself
Yeah.
and have that 8-year-old give you advice to your adult self, what would that 8-year-old self say to you right now?
What I would tell myself and remind myself is the best inspirations that I find always come not on my computer. They, for me, uh, not on Instagram, not on Pinterest. Like, if I find something for a project, it's because I was even just out walking around, got a coffee somewhere, and I noticed, like, a detail on a door, or I was reading a book. Like, I love coffee table books. I think my I I don't do this ritual enough, but now that we're kind of settling into our house, I'm trying to set up a space to activate it more, if
Sure.
that makes sense. Like,
Absolute sense.
having coffee table books around in the morning, because it's not like I don't need to be reading it like a newspaper. I don't want to necessarily be on my phone. Browsing a coffee table book and just, like, taking in some visuals from people who put this together in a really thoughtful way. I think kind of like art, inspiring art, I would highly recommend. And then come online. Then, like, write your thoughts down in some way, or draw them, or process, like, do your own internal processing. Um, the computer is an amazing tool, and, like, I can't live without it. But if I forget that I have my own brain and my own source of what I like and what I don't like, then I think you kind of fall into the meme sphere. It's just like everything looks the
Right.
same, and it's not,
Oh, yeah.
it doesn't, like, have that emotional connection that you want.
So, to close, this has been fantastic, by the way. To close, um, Milo is getting his driver's license this year,
Oh my gosh. I can't believe that.
and Remy's turning 21, so you
Oh
can
my
have a
god.
drink with her this year.
Great.
And you remember meeting them when they were like
Yeah.
10 and like
It's
6 or whatever,
crazy.
right?
It's crazy.
I'd like to ask a favor as we close.
Sure.
What advice do you have for Remy and Milo about creativity or just life that you wanna pass off to them?
Yeah, I mean, I think, sort of riffing off of what I was saying, it's just so important to not that this is always easy, and not that it will come some naturally, but I think it's really important to, maybe this is cliche, but, like, be yourself and show up as yourself as much as you can, and take the time. I think more than that, even take the time to, like, find what really resonates with you, and just be aware of, how you feel, wherever you are, like, whatever you're doing, experiment with different things. Like, you're never committed. I think we live in a world now where you can more transmogrify yourself. So
There
it's
you go.
just,
Bill Watterson would be proud.
yeah. um but just take the time to reflect on what really resonates with you, um, and then go out and go for it.
That was beautiful. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Erin McDermott,
Thanks
I
so much,
love
Mark.
you very much.
I love
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks for having
And
me.
maybe we'll do this again.
Sure.
We'll do it like 1 year from now when Will is 2.5
Oh
years
my
old.
gosh. Can't
And
wait.
then, yeah.
That sounds great.
Well, thank you. And much love
Thank
to
you,
Brendan.
Mark.
And we'll talk again soon.
Okay. Bye.